In this session, we are going to examine Hecht-Rowling theorem. Hecht-Rowling theorem is a very important theory in international trade. Hecht-Rowling theorem tries to answer two questions that were left unanswered by classical economists like Adam Smith and Ricardo. Classical economists considered only one fact of production in their trade theory, that is labor, and according to classical economists, comparative advantage arises due to differences in labor productivity. Classical economists did not provide any explanation for the differences in labor productivity. That is, they did not explain what is the major reason for the differences in comparative advantage between nations. That is, they did not explain the basis of comparative advantage, and they also could not explain what is the impact of international trade on uh, prices of factors of production. Hecht-Rowling theorem focuses on these two aspects. First, what is the basic reason for comparative advantage, and second, what is the impact of international trade on factor rewards. Hecht-Rowling theorem was developed by two Swedish economists, Heckscher and Rowling. Rowling was a student of Heckscher, and initially Heckscher published his theorem, but however it remained largely unnoticed, and the credit for popularizing this theorem goes to Rowling. He slightly modified Heckscher's version and presented the Heckscher-Rowling theorem. Even though many new theories emerged in the field of international economics after the publication of Hecht-Rowling theorem, it is still considered as the modern theory of international trade, and it is also known as factor endowment theory because it gives much importance to factor endowments. Popularly, it is also known as HO theory. Hecht-Rowling theory has two parts. First portion is Hecht-Rowling theorem, which concentrates on the pattern of trade, or it examines what forms the basis of comparative advantage. And second portion is the factor price equalization theorem, which is actually considered as a corollary to Hecht-Rowling theorem, and it focuses on what is the impact of international trade on returns to factors of production or factor rewards. Hecht-Rowling theorem is based on a large number of assumptions. Now let us examine what are the important assumptions of Hecht-Rowling theorem. Uh, First assumption is that there are two nations, two commodities and two factors of production. That is, Hecht-Rowling theorem is based on a 2 into 2 into 2 general equilibrium framework. Here we assume that there are only two nations, and we consider nation 1 and nation 2, and we also assume that there are only two products, commodity X and commodity Y, and we consider the case of only two factors of production, that is labor and capital. Second assumption is that both nations use the same technology in production. That means, in other words, we can say that production functions differ between commodities, but they do not differ between countries. Both the nations use the same type of technology for the production of a particular commodity. Third assumption is commodity X is labor intensive and commodity Y is capital intensive in both nations. That is, we assume that one commodity is always labor intensive and the other commodity is always capital intensive. Here in our example, we assume that X is always labor intensive and Y is always capital intensive. That means we do not consider the case of factor intensity reversal. Factor intensity reversal refers to a situation where the same commodity becomes capital intensive for a given factor price ratio and it becomes labor intensive for another range of factor price ratio. Here we assume that there is no factor intensity reversal. One commodity is always labor intensive and other is always capital intensive. The next assumption is that both commodities are produced under constant returns to scale in both nations. We assume that there is the presence of constant returns to scale. Next assumption is there is incomplete specialization in the production of commodities in both nations. That means both nations produce some amount of both X and Y. There is no complete specialization. Nation 1 produces some amount of commodity X and some amount of commodity Y. Similarly, nation 2 also produces some amount of commodity X and some amount of commodity Y. There is no complete specialization in production. And the other assumption is that taste and preferences are the same in both nations. Both nations have same taste and preferences. Another assumption is that there is perfect competition both in the labor market, both in the factor market and commodity market. In both commodity market and factor market, there is perfect competition. The model assumes the presence of perfect competition in both factor market and commodity market. And another assumption is that there is perfect mobility of factors within a country, but the model rules out the possibility of international factor mobility. That means both labor and capital in a Heckscher-Rohlin framework can move freely within the country, but there is no international factor mobility. Labor and capital cannot move from one country to another country. The model assumes that there is no transportation cost and there is no other barrier to international trade. Another assumption is that resources are fully employed in both the nations. Now, after examining these assumptions, now let us examine some important concepts which are essential to understand Heckscher-Rohlin theorem. Also, let us examine some important geometric tools. Now let us see what is meant by factor intensity. Here, factor intensity is a very important concept. We have already assumed that commodity Y is capital intensive and commodity X is labor intensive. Factor intensity shows the capital labor ratio in production, and in the case of our example, commodity Y is capital intensive and commodity X is labor intensive. That means capital labor ratio in the production of Y is higher than capital labor ratio in the production of X in both countries. In the figure, you can see that capital is taken along the y-axis and labor is taken along the x-axis, and the ray from the origin shows the capital intensity of production. Actually, the slope of the ray from the origin shows capital labor ratio. In the first figure refers to the case of nation 1, and in the first figure, capital labor ratio for the production of Y is much higher than capital labor ratio in the production of X. That means in the first nation, capital labor ratio is higher for the production of Y. In the second figure, also you can see that capital labor ratio in the production of Y is greater than capital labor ratio in the production of X. In both figures, the slope of the ray from the origin, which indicates the production of Y, has a higher slope than the other ray. So capital intensity of production is higher for commodity Y than for commodity X in both nations. That means capital labor ratio for the production of Y is greater than capital labor ratio in the production of X in both the nations. Now let us examine another important concept, that is factor abundance. Here we have assumed that nation 1 is labor abundant and nation 2 is capital abundant. What is factor abundance? There are two ways to define factor abundance. First is in terms of physical amount of capital and labor available in the country. That is, if the total availability of capital is greater than total availability of labor, we say that the country is capital rich or capital abundant. The second definition is in terms of relative factor prices of labor and capital. relative prices of labor and capital. So nation 1 is labor, we have assumed that nation 1 is labor abundant and nation 2 is capital abundant. That means the ratio of price of labor to price of capital is lower in nation 1 than in nation 2. That is PL by PK, that is the ratio of price of labor to price of capital in nation 1 is less than price of labor to price of capital in nation 2. We know that price of labor is W, wage, and price of capital is rate of interest. It is denoted by R. So W by R ratio shows the factor price ratio. W by R in nation 1 is less than W by R in nation 2. That is, factor price ratio expressed as W by R in nation 1 is less than W by R in nation 2. That means nation 1 is labor abundant and nation 2 is capital abundant. Since we have assumed that taste and preferences are same in both the nations, the two definitions of factor abundance lead to the same conclusions. So there is not much difference between the two definitions. If we do not assume that taste and preferences are same in the two nations, then we have to choose the second definition, that is definition in terms of relative factor prices. Now let us examine what is the relationship between factor abundance and shape of the production possibility frontier. In the diagram, we have taken X along the X-axis, commodity X along the X-axis and commodity Y along the Y-axis, and we have plotted the production possibility frontiers of two nations, nation 1 and nation 2. And we know that nation 1 is the labor abundant nation and nation 2 is the capital abundant nation, and commodity X is the labor intensive commodity and commodity Y is the capital intensive commodity. When we examine the production possibility frontiers, we can see that production possibility frontier of nation 1 is skewed towards the X-axis, that is the axis which measures the labor intensive commodity, and the production possibility frontier of nation 2 is skewed towards the Y-axis. Y-axis is the axis which measures the labor intensive capital intensive commodity Y. So we can see that nation 1's production possibility frontier is skewed towards the X-axis which measures commodity X, and nation 2's production possibility frontier is skewed towards the Y-axis which measures the commodity Y. That is, labor abundant nation's production frontier is skewed towards the X-axis which measures the labor intensive commodity, and capital abundant nation's production possibility frontier is skewed towards the Y-axis which measures the capital intensive commodity. Now let us examine the statement of Heckscher-Ohlin theorem. According to Heckscher-Ohlin theorem, a nation will export the commodity whose production requires the intensive use of the nation's relatively abundant and cheap factor, and the nation imports the commodity whose production requires the intensive use of the nation's relatively scarce and expensive factor. So, according to Heckscher-Ohlin theorem, a labor-rich nation exports the relatively labor-intensive commodity and imports the capital-intensive commodity. Similarly, capital-rich nation exports the relatively capital-intensive commodity and imports the relatively labor-intensive commodity. So, we can say that labor-rich or labor-abundant nation exports labor-intensive commodity and capital-rich nation exports capital-intensive commodity. So, here we can see that comparative advantage depends on factor endowments. That is why this theory is known as factor endowment theory. So we can state the Heckscher-Ohlin theorem in another way. Given the assumptions of Heckscher-Ohlin model, the capital rich country will have a comparative advantage in the capital intensive good, and labor rich country will have the comparative advantage in the labor intensive good. So Heckscher-Ohlin theorem can explain what is the basic reason for comparative advantage. It is the differences in factor endowments that leads to comparative advantage. Relatively labor rich country has a comparative advantage in the production of labor intensive good, and relatively capital rich country has a comparative advantage in the production of capital intensive good. Now let us examine Heckscher-Ohlin theorem with the help of the figure. So in the figure, the first figure shows the pre-trade situation. We have the production possibility frontier of nation 1 and production possibility frontier of nation 2. Commodity Y is taken along the Y axis and commodity X is taken along the X axis. And here we have another geometric tool which is known as community indifference curve. As you know, the community indifference curve shows different combinations of two commodities that yield the same level of satisfaction to a country or a community. So it is analogous to individual consumers indifference curve. So in the case of international trade, we are concerned with community indifference curves, and we have two community indifference curves, indifference curve 1 and indifference curve 2, and we can see that first let us consider nation 1's production possibility frontier. Nation 1's production possibility frontier is tangent to the first community indifference curve at point A. Point A is the point of production for nation 1 in the pre-trade situation, and nation 2's production possibility frontier is tangent to the first community indifference curve at point A dash, and point A dash is the point of production for nation 2 in the pre-trade situation. And here one important thing that you have to remember is that the country's production and consumption possibilities are limited in the pre-trade situation by the production possibility frontier. Nation 1 produces and consumes at the point A, where the production possibility frontier is tangent to the highest possible community indifference curve. Similarly, nation 2 produces and consumes at the point A dash, where the country's PPF is tangent to the highest possible community indifference curve, that is community indifference curve 1. And at the point A, you can see that there is the price ratio line PA, which shows the domestic price ratio between two commodities X and Y. At the point A, the production possibility frontier is tangent to the price ratio line as well as the community indifference curve. And at point A dash, nation 2's production possibility frontier is tangent to the domestic price ratio line PA dash as well as the first community indifference curve. So A is the point of production and consumption for nation 1 in the pre-trade situation, and A dash is the point of production and consumption for nation 2 in the pre-trade situation. Now let us consider the second figure, which introduces the possibility of international trade. In the Heckscher-Ohlin framework, you can see that nation 1's point of production shifts from A to point B in the post-trade situation. Here we are considering the line PB, which shows the international terms of trade. Terms of trade shows the ratio of the price of export commodity to the price of import commodity in a situation where we are considering only two factors. When we are considering only two commodities. If we are considering many commodities, terms of trade is the ratio of the price index of export commodities to the price index of import commodities. Here in the Heckscher-Ohlin framework, we are considering only two commodities. So terms of trade line shows the ratio of this is the international terms of trade line. International terms of trade line, PB shows the ratio of the price of export commodity to the ratio of the price of import commodity, and here international terms of trade line is very important, and point of production for nation 1 is the point where the production possibility frontier is tangent to the international terms of trade line PB. Point B is the point of production for nation 1 in the post-trade situation, and for nation 2 point B dash is the point of production, because at B dash the nation 2's production possibility frontier is tangent to the terms of trade line. So we can see that for nation 1 point of production shifts from point A to point B, and for nation 2 point of production shifts from point A dash to point B dash. So for the first nation, as a result of the possibility of international trade, nation 1 specializes more in the production of commodity X, that is the capital rich nation, the labor rich nation. Nation 1 is labor abundant, so the labor abundant nation specializes more in the production of labor intensive commodity X, it produces more of commodity X. Similarly, nation 2, which is the capital rich nation, it produces more of the capital intensive commodity Y. Nation 2 produces less of the other commodity X. Similarly, nation 1 reduces the production of commodity Y. Now, the international terms of trade line is tangent to the second community indifference curve. Here we do not show the first community indifference curve. The terms of trade line is tangent to the second community indifference curve at the point E is equal to E dash. That is, the point of production for nation 1 is B, but however the point of consumption for the nation is the point where the terms of trade line is tangent to the highest possible community indifference curve, that is at the point E is equal to E dash. So we can see the trade triangle of the first nation, which is represented by BCE, where the country exports BC amount of commodity X and imports CE amount of commodity Y. Similarly, the nation 2 imports the commodity X exported by nation 1. So from the figure you can see that nation 2's import is C dash E dash units of commodity X, and it exports, nation 2 exports B dash C dash amount of commodity Y. So both the nations move from a lower community indifference curve to a higher community indifference curve in the post-trade situation. Earlier, before in the pre-trade situation, both were in the first community indifference curve. Now both of them, even though they are producing at points B and B dash, they are consuming at point E is equal to E dash, and they have moved from a lower indifference curve to a higher indifference curve in the post-trade situation. So both the nations are gaining from international trade. Now we have the factor price equalization theorem. Factor price equalization theorem holds only when the Heckscher-Rohlin theorem holds. That is, only when the assumptions of Heckscher-Rohlin theorem are assumed, then only factor price equalization theorem is valid. And it was Samuelson who developed factor price equalization theorem. So the theorem is known as Heckscher-Rohlin-Samuelson theorem. Now let us take the factor price equalization theorem. Factor price equalization theorem states that within the Heckscher-Rohlin framework, international trade will bring about equalization in relative and absolute returns to homogeneous factors across nations. Now let us examine how factor prices are equalized across nations. First of all, let us take the case of nation 1. We know that nation 1 is a labor abundant nation, and when it engages in international trade, demand for its export good increases. So demand for commodity, with the increase in demand for commodity X, demand for labor also increases, and there is a reduction in the demand for commodity Y, then the relative price of labor rises, causing wages to rise, while the relative demand for capital falls, causing the interest rate to fall. In the case of Nation 2, we know that Nation 2 specializes in the production of capital intensive good Y, then when it enters into international trade with the other nation, it specializes in the production of Y, and it reduces the production of the labor intensive good X. Then relative demand for capital increases in Nation 2, and this leads to rise in interest rate in Nation 2, while the relative demand for labor falls, wages also decreases. Now let us explain factor price equalization theorem with the help of the diagram. In the x-axis we take W by R ratio, that is ratio of factor prices. Then along the y-axis we take Px by Py, that is relative commodity prices are taken along the y-axis. We know that given the assumption of perfect competition and the prevalence of same technology within nation, there is one-to-one relationship between factor intensity and commodity price ratios. That is, for a given factor price ratio, for a given W by R ratio, there is a unique commodity price ratio, Px by Py. So, in the figure, A shows the production of Nation 1, and A dash shows the production of Nation 2 in the pre-trade situation. Corresponding to point A, factor price ratio is W by R1 and commodity price ratio is PA. So, in the pre-trade situation, in Nation 1, wage rate is lesser and price of capital, that is interest, is higher. So, W by R ratio is lower for Nation 1, and Px by Py is also lower for Nation 1 because price of X is low in Nation 1 because X is a labor intensive commodity. And in the case of Nation 2, A dash is the point of production of Nation 2 in the pre-trade situation. The corresponding factor price ratio is W by R. W by R ratio is high in Nation 2 because it is a capital abundant nation. So price of capital is lesser and price of labor, that is wage, is higher. So W by R ratio is higher, and the corresponding commodity price ratio is denoted by PA. So price of X is relatively higher there and price of Y is relatively lower there because Nation 2 is a capital abundant nation. So as these two nations engage in international trade, in Nation 1, relative price of labor increases and there is a decline in relative price of relative price of capital, that is interest rate. W by R ratio gradually increases, and we can see that commodity price ratio also increases. Px by Py increases and it becomes equal to PB, and factor price ratio becomes equal to W by R. W by R star. In country 1, factor price ratio W by R increases from W by R1 to W by R star, and commodity price ratio also increases from PA to PB is equal to PB star. And in the case of country 2, factor price ratio decreases from W by R2 to W by R star, and commodity price ratio also decreases from PA dash to PB is equal to PB dash. And finally, equilibrium point is reached at the point where B is equal to B dash, where the commodity prices and factor prices are equalized. When we assume that there is perfect competition in the factor market, both nations use the same technology and constant returns to scale, it follows that trade equalizes absolute returns to factors of production also. So according to factor price equalization theorem, as a result of international trade, there is an increase in wage rate in the low wage nation, and in the high wage nation, that is in nation 2, there is a decline in wage rate, and thus international trade reduces the pre-trade differences in wage rate between the two nations. So as a result of international trade, pre-trade differences in the price of factors of production is declining. And similarly, in the case of nation 2, we know that nation 2 is a capital cheap nation. It is a capital abundant nation, and in nation 2, the price of capital, that is interest rate, increases, and in nation 1 is the capital expensive nation. In nation 1, price of capital falls, and the pre-trade differences in rate of interest between these two nations are equalized. So international trade reduces the pre-trade differences in W and R between the two nations. Here it is very important to remember that in the case of Heckscher-Ohlin theorem, there is no international mobility of factors of production, there is only international mobility of goods. However, factor prices are equalized in the long run. That with the international trade, factor prices are equalized in two different countries which are engaging in international trade. The pre-trade differences in factor prices are brought into equality through the movement of commodities. Now let us examine Leontief paradox. Heckscher-Ohlin theorem's first empirical verification was carried out by Vasily Leontief in 1951. He used data collected from US economy for the year 1947, and it was expected that is Leontief expected that as per Heckscher-Ohlin theorem, United States of America will export capital intensive commodities, and it will import labor intensive commodities, because US economy was expected to be the most capital abundant nation at that period of time. So according to Heckscher-Ohlin theorem, since America was a capital abundant nation, it was expected that it exports capital intensive commodities and imports labor intensive commodities. The results of Leontief's empirical study was contrary to his expectation. The results found that United States of America was actually exporting labor intensive commodities and it is importing capital intensive commodities. This is known as Leontief paradox. However, Leontief did not try to reject Heckscher-Ohlin theorem. He tried to rationalize his own findings. He suggested that US labor is highly productive than labor in other countries. So he assumed that US labor is 3 times more productive than labor in other countries. So when we multiply the total availability of labor force in US economy with 3, then US economy was actually a labor rich economy. That may be the reason for the Leontief paradox. Then he also explained that the taste and preferences of US people are biased towards capital intensive commodity. So that may be another reason for Leontief paradox, that is, as taste and preferences of US people are biased towards capital intensive commodities, they are actually consuming more of capital intensive commodities and they are exporting labor intensive commodities. Later, many empirical verifications were carried out by many economists and they obtained different types of results also. And in the course of time, new trade theories emerged in the field of international trade, and many of those theories assumed the existence of differences in technology between nations, then the existence of non-traded commodities. They also assumed the presence of transportation costs, economies of scale, and product differentiation. Still, Heckscher-Rohlin theorem is considered as a very important theorem in the field of international trade, which explains the international trade between developed countries and developing countries.